Welcome to Minimal Impact Design Standards MIDS Calculator Module 8, Tree Trench. To view other modules, you can go to the link shown here on the right. In this module, we're going to take a look at the guidance and resources in the Minnesota Stormwater Manual. We're going to take a look at two different best management practices that are in the calculator: tree trench, tree box with no underdrain; tree trench, tree box with an underdrain. And the icons for those are shown here. You'll see those icons in the calculator and in the Minnesota Stormwater Manual. And then briefly, we'll come back and look at the guidance and the resources and show you in the manual, show you how to get to those from the MIDS calculator. So I will escape from the PowerPoint and go to the calculator. This icon here, you double click, and it will open up the calculator for you. I'm going to go to File, create a new file, and I'm going to call this Tree BMP. Save it, and then the main screen in the calculator should open up. There are three values you need to enter to be able to move around in the calculator. The first, you need to answer this question: are you using the calculator to determine compliance with a construction stormwater permit? I'm going to say no. I need to enter my zip code information. And you'll see that when I enter that my rainfall value shown here in the gray box will populate. And I need to have an impervious acreage. And I'm going to, for this example, I'm going to have 20 acres of impervious surface. The fields up here are optional. I'm going to leave my default value for a retention requirement of 1.1 inch. That's the MIDS requirement. I'll also leave my phosphorus and TSS event mean concentrations at their default values. Those can all be changed, and you get a little warning from the calculator that you've changed them, but you can change those values in the calculator. I'll now go to the schematic tab shown here on the top. And you'll see on the left toolbar here that it gives you kind of an accounting of how many acres you have in your system that have not yet been routed to a practice. And it tells you what your performance goal requirement is. Since we don't have any BMPs yet, no other information is populated. We'll start by looking at looking for the tree trench best management practices, and you can see that here is the tree trench with no underdrain and a tree trench with an underdrain. I'm going to click and drag the tree trench with an underdrain onto my main screen. I'm also going to click a tree trench without an underdrain onto the screen. So I'm first going to work with the underdrain system. I'll right-click or double-click on the practice, and you'll see that best management practice opens. For this particular practice, I'm going to route 10 acres of impervious surface to the practice. I'll go to the BMP Parameters tab shown here, and this screen can be fairly complicated. A lot of the values that you need to enter are shown in the white cells here, and I'll walk you through those, and we may bounce back and forth a little bit between the manual and the calculator. So the first question I need to answer is the underdrain elevated above the bottom. I'm going to say no. The next two questions is the bottom or the sides of this practice lined with an impermeable liner. I'm going to say no. If you had contaminated soils or some other reason to put a liner in, you would say yes. I'm going to bounce back to the PowerPoint for just a second and remind you that the tree trench system is actually largely an underground system. If you're walking down the street above a tree trench practice, you may not even know it's there, but underneath you is where the practice is actually located. So these practices can actually be quite large. So I'll go back to the calculator, and it's asking me for a media surface area. That's the area shown here. I'm sorry. It's asking me for, yes, the media surface area is the area shown here, and that's going to be 100,000 square feet. As I said, these systems can be quite large. It's going to ask me for the bottom surface area, and that is also going to be 100,000. So this is a rectangular system. Note that in this practice, that the water is going to be stored in the media, this area here. For practice such as bioretention or an infiltration trench, you actually have a ponded depth on top of the media. But for this practice, the water is stored here and eventually may infiltrate or go to an underdrain. I'm going to have my media depth at 3 feet. And now I need to enter a value for my media fill capacity minus wilting point. I'm going to click on the Help button. This will take me into the Minnesota Stormwater Manual to a page called Requirements, Recommendations, and Information for Using Trees with an Underdrain as a BMP in the MIDS calculator. And you can see on this page that there's information on the inputs that you need for the calculator, methodology for calculating volume and fluid reductions, assumptions, and there's an example. This is a fairly complicated practice. We'll talk a little bit about the evapotranspiration credit that you're going to get later. But if you remember, I'm going to scroll down here to this table, and here's where you can get your values for porosity, wilting point, and so forth. And you'll need those values in the calculator. So I'm going back to the calculator now, my media field capacity minus wilting point. I'm going to enter a value of 0.11, which I may have gotten from that previous page in the manual. My media porosity minus field capacity, I'm going to enter a value of 0.25. It's going to ask me my tree type. I'm going to say deciduous. It's going to ask me my tree size. This is the eventual size of the tree, either small, medium, or large. And you can get that information again from the manual. I'm going to go back to the manual here. And there are tables in here regarding tree sizes and so forth. So there's tables in the manual on morphology information for different tree species. So if you know your species but you're not sure of the size, you can go to these tables and it will provide you with that information. The number of trees, and I'm going to put 150 trees into this system. Again, quite a large system. And when I do that, you'll see that I now have a soil volume of 2,000 cubic feet per tree, which is ideal, and it's a recommended value from the manual. As this number begins to decrease, your evapotranspiration credit will decrease because you're not giving the tree enough volume to thrive. The media planting mix, I'm going to select media mix D. This is described in the Stormwater Manual. This is a mix that has sufficient nutrients for trees to grow, but is a low phosphorus media at the same time, so it's not going to leach phosphorus. If it was going to leach phosphorus, I would have to answer this question about whether the phosphorus content of soil was below a certain level. I am not going to put an amendment into this practice. My underlying soil is a D soil. That's why we have an underdrain. And so we need to draw the water down in 48 hours. Most of that water is going to go to the underdrain itself. Some will seep into the soil underlying the practice. And so when I do that, you'll see now that these gray cells begin to populate with the volume reductions that we're achieving with this practice. So I'll click OK and go back to my main screen, and you'll see that I still have 10 acres of impervious surface that has not been routed. And you'll see that I'm not nearly achieving my performance goal, less than halfway to my performance goal. So now I'm going to go into the tree trench without an underdrain. Double click. I'm going to route that remaining 10 acres to this practice, and then go into my BMP parameters tab. Again, my inputs, I'm going to have 100,000 square feet at the media surface and at the bottom of the system, and a 3-foot depth of media. I'm going to have the same values I had before for wilting point, my field capacity minus wilting point, and then porosity of 0.25. Same types of trees, deciduous, large trees, and 150 of them. Now this practice, because it's an infiltration practice here, we're going to have an A soil, and that water can draw down in 48 hours. through 3 feet of, again, the water's being stored here. That 3 feet of water needs to draw down. If I had a different soil with a lower infiltration rate, I would get an error message saying, I can't draw that water down in sufficient time. I'll put that on D soil, I should get the error message. So I can't, if I had it on D soil, I couldn't get all that water into the system. But I do have an A soil, so I have a rapid infiltration rate, and I can get that water into the system. So now you see that everything's populated again. You're getting an evapotranspiration credit. You're getting a credit for interception on the trees. Both these credits are the same as they were for the BMP with an underdrain. But you see that we're getting significantly more infiltration into the system. I should point out that the calculator doesn't care whether the water's going to evapotranspiration or to infiltration. It's being taken out of the system. So the actual evapotranspiration number would, in reality, be higher. So we're kind of over-crediting infiltration to some extent. But the main point is the water is being moved out of the system. So we'll click OK, and we'll go back, and now we'll look at our system. And even though this practice without an underdrain is achieving well above its performance, what it needs to get that water off that 10 acres of impervious infiltrated, we're still not achieving our performance goal, and that's because we have some leftover water from the tree trench with an underdrain. So I'm going to go back to this BMP, double click, and I'm now going to route this BMP to my tree trench without an underdrain. So I'm taking that excess water that couldn't be infiltrated and routing it to this practice, and now you see that we are achieving the performance goal, and we're getting 99% reduction from our annual phosphorus and TSS. On this main screen, we can go to the Results tab, and we can see here's the accounting for the areas that are being routed. You go down here to the BMP summary information. I'm achieving my performance goal and getting 99% reduction of annual volume phosphorus and TSS. Tree trench systems, as I mentioned, are very effective when you have good soils that allow the water to infiltrate. Even if you don't, you're getting some removal through the system, either below the underdrain or through evapotranspiration and canopy interception. You go down further, you can see on the screen, you can see how the waters and the pollutants are distributed between the two practices. For example, if you go to the annual summary, you'll see that about 13.6 acre-feet of water is being routed to the no underdrain system from the BMP that's upstream. So this will show you, this chart will show you the total results for your site. Again, if you're in any practice, any of these BMPs in the calculator, you can get to guidance on how to address that best management practice in the calculator by clicking either on links that are there on that page or by clicking on the Help button. Again, I clicked on the Help button, it takes me back to this guidance page in the manual for that particular practice. To view other modules in the manual, you can go to these links shown here. That ends Module 8, Tree Trench, and Tree Box.